to the exploration of consciousness.
Hey, welcome back to the Exploration of Consciousness. I'm your host, Mr. Matt Presti. Joining me today is Mr. Caleb Lamont, a frequent guest on the Unslaved podcast with Michael Tessarian and David Whitehead. And he is also the curator of the Van Helsing Library, which currently isn't up at this time, but he can explain more on that. And Caleb is what I would describe as a Shenku warrior. He is a person who has mastered pure travel, if you will, or what is also known as a phantom passenger, which is kind of a very cool term. There aren't many nomadic souls on this planet, but Caleb certainly has mastered the art of nomadicity, if that's a term. If not, we just made up a new word. Fucking A, brother. Welcome to the Exploration of Consciousness. Oh, you're muted. There you go.
Thank you for having me.
You got it. So tell us a little bit about yourself, Caleb. Real quick, Caleb stayed with us, Lori and I, for a few weeks, and he hung out around the Salem, Missouri area. Dude is super adaptable. I haven't met many people who can adapt in such a quick and efficient way as yourself, Caleb. But we'll share some of the stuff we got into, but just give us a little bit of background on who Caleb is.
Well, I've met a lot of people that I've learned from, and ever since I was a kid, I guess I just took lessons from things, people, and movies and everything that I think more so than other kids, I guess. Whereas others wouldn't see something as being a lesson, right? I saw it as a lesson or something to be learned from it, you know. Like a lot of the movies that kids watch, they actually contain lessons, but I think a lot of times those lessons just sort of go right over the head. And also big part of it was ex-military guys. They had a lot of valuable insights to share, and I always loved talking to ex-military guys, even when I was a kid. Still do. You're muted, I think. I can't hear you, bud.
One for one on the mute. We each got a mute button there, star. Right on. We earned the mute button merit badge. All right. Yeah, we both have met a lot of ex-military people. I know when you came to stay with us for that period of time, we started talking, and I mentioned that I knew some guys, and you being a gunsmith as well, somebody who likes target practice and training with firearms, which we did a lot of. I'm going to roll a couple videos that we made together where we did train with some ex-military, and it was really awesome. I learned a lot, and I improved my handgun efficiency because ironically you had the identical handgun that I had. And so we were able to work together on, and you helped me build a target range on my nephew's property for him. So that was really great. And we got to practice with it. And two Garys, ironically, ex-military, we got to work with them and do some firearms training, ballistic training, things of that nature. But so where do you hail from originally, and what started you on your journey as a traveler? You're muted.
Originally from Georgia. Come from a Civil War family down there. Pretty famous one for the area, anyways. My traveling basically may have come from my childhood, which involved a lot of moving. Went to a whole heck of a lot of different public schools growing up due to frequent moving. It may have bled over into adult life, the need to just keep moving around. So I guess, when I was a teenager, before I really got my first car and had to the ability to move around, I was already like looking at maps and everything. So thinking about like where I would go and what places I would check out. So I was also interested in those shows that were playing on TV called Man vs. Wild with Bear Grylls, and Survivor Man with Les Stroud. And I was checking out books about, outdoorsman stuff. So when I got my first car, I basically just pulled out a road atlas and chose a place and went there. So it's, I guess it's ingrained in me.
And you took some survival training, right? You want to talk about that a little bit? Because that's probably something that I imagine helped you to, be able to cope with surroundings, cope with weather. How did that impact your life?
Well, the training I took, the promise of it was that at the end of the week, you would know, you would have the tools, meaning the knowledge of how to survive anywhere with nothing. In other words, you could be butt naked and survive anywhere, whether it be in the desert or in the tundra or whatever. The principles are the same. There's certain priorities that you have to meet, which is the first and foremost of is shelter, because the number one survival killer is exposure to the environment. So you have to protect yourself from that exposure. That shelter can be clothes. Clothes are shelter. And then building shelter. And the thing about most TV shows is that they are pitiful at teaching the audience how to build an effective shelter.
Yeah, because
Sometimes,
there's a whole bunch of survivor shows, all that stuff that came around in the late 90s, early 2000s. And I never could get into that stuff. I mean, it's just, I had done a little survival training myself, 9 years in ninjutsu, but the whole of that reality thing just never meshed with me. And it still doesn't really, hardly to this day. I mean, you're talking about how that they never really actually train you. How much different is the real training versus the pseudo reality TV show introduction?
well, when you learn the principles, the absolute principles of survival, then it's like a template or a formula or a recipe, right? A recipe for survival. And then you go back and watch those shows and you notice how they're fucking up the recipe every single time.
Call out all their mistakes.
It's like
You
if
know,
you know exactly how to make biscuits, and you're watching somebody else who doesn't know how to make biscuits try to make biscuits, you're going to see every mistake they're making along the way.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
Oh, that's cool. Because who was your instructor? Is a pretty popular guy. He's written books too, hasn't he?
Tom Brown Jr.
Yeah, yeah. He's extensive, man. He's got a lot of work out there.
Yeah.
If somebody wants to get into that and learn this recipe for survival at the base level, where should they go? In your
Well,
recommendation?
again, it's just my recommendation because I would recommend the books of Tom Brown Jr. And with all due respect to the man, I would only suggest the books instead of the class. However, if you are a hands-on person, the class is invaluable. But um, there's nothing pretty much there's hardly anything I learned in the class that I didn't already know from reading the books. There's a little bit extra, but it is valuable to take the class. But I would just say the books. But see, that's my opinion, and it depends on what you want, because it is it is the essence of a minimalist
Mhm.
approach to survival. Whereas if you're not wanting the minimalist version, the caveman version, if you're wanting something a little bit more modern, then there's other better options out there for you, because there are other approaches which will integrate the modern um, equipment and options for maximizing whatever it is your goal is. But mine was the minimalist approach, and I think that Tom Brown Jr.'s books are absolutely the best for that. I've never read the Firefox. I know a lot of people recommend the Firefox book collection for that, which I can't comment because I don't know.
Yeah, it sounds interesting. At the very least, you'd want the minimalist training, right? Because if you ever encountered any kind of a calamity, tornado, anything where your shelter's wiped out, and the emergency services, being an emergency responder, first responder myself, we pull up on scenes sometimes and there's nothing left of a house, and it's not really quite the same. There's always the motels, there's always family, but in the case of something massively destructive like hurricane, tornado, things that actually blow the house away, you could actually save your life with at the very least a minimalist background and
Or
survival.
at the very least, say if you lived in a suburb
Mhm.
and society all of a sudden just went haywire, and there was the government agency with the bullhorn saying, "We have free food, we have shelter, just follow this way." At least you would have the psychological security of knowing that you can, you know, eat worms and sleep in the woods instead of going that route.
Yeah, and identify plants, which there's
Yep.
many. If pretty much anywhere you live, there's edible plants, and most people.
There's nobody that can threaten you with starvation. There's nobody that can threaten you with, um, well, you need to come be under my care, or else you won't even be able to survive. Well, I might be more comfortable under your care for for X amount of time, but I'm not going to die out here.
Right.
I might be uncomfortable, but
Yeah.
I can go this way and still not die. So you
Well,
know,
it presents you with options, I suppose, when you have that training. So yeah, that's cool, man, and I'm sure that's come in handy on more than one time in your travels. What was your, I'm just going to throw this at you. What was your most difficult ever night, you know, being a traveler that you've had to experience in terms of survival and really testing you? What was the hardest that you got that you can, share with us in terms of battling the elements and nature? I mean, because nature will take your ass out if you're not, if you're not prepared in some. So what is your most incredible challenge that you experienced overnight in battling to survive and deal with the elements?
Well, that would be, I was up in the Northeast, and it was February, and I drove across state lines way out of town. I was on a little field trip, and got pulled over, and my car got towed away.
Oh, shit.
Me and the guy I was with got taken to jail and sat in a cell for a few hours and bailed out. It was the weekend, and they had scheduled my court date for Monday morning. There were no hotels in the area. I had no money anyways. I wanted to get my car back, and I wanted to go take care of the court date. So additionally, I had an argument with the person I was with, and we split ways. So I had to weather out 2 nights. And basically, what I did is I walked down to near where the car impound was. And it was like in a pretty heavy populated area, like suburban / like urban. But I walked down the street, and there was these electrical lines and woods on both sides of them. Thin woods, not like a forest or anything, but like enough woods to kind of hide me.
Sure.
So I walked down under these electrical lines and just sort of like gathered up sticks and shit and like lit them on fire. And basically like a very small fire to hide, so it's not like giving away my position, but at the same time, it was fucking freezing. It was like cold as hell. And I basically just spent the night like that, like raking in little sticks and shit and keeping this fire lit, and it was smoking like crazy. So the next day, my clothes were just saturated with like smoke.
Oh,
I smelled like, oh, dude. By the time the whole ordeal was over, which took like another few days, I got back home and took a fucking shower, dude. I was dude, I fucking reeked so bad.
yeah, I've been there, man. So you got your court date all met, and you survived?
I eventually got it all sorted out. That was it happened so that it taught me a valuable lesson about being very careful about who I associate with and how I associate with them, and how much trust to actually put in them and all that, et cetera, et cetera. So that's always those are always important lessons. Luckily, it was a costly lesson.
Yeah.
But luckily, I was able to weather out through the whole thing from all the way until the end, and I got everything squared away by the time it was all said and done.
Good deal.
Yeah.
Good deal. That brings to mind an experience of my own. I was kayaking with a couple buddies, and this had to be shit, man, 1995 or somewhere in there. And we're going down the current river, which I think you and I floated, didn't we? Did we take the kayaks out and float?
Yeah.
And so it's January, like 12th, something like that, and it's colder than shit. It's 20 degrees outside, but a flowing river doesn't freeze. So we put in, and we're thinking, okay, we're going to do this. We put in at like 2:00 in the afternoon, and we were all thinking we could get to our destination by like 5:30 or 6, which is around sunset, right? So little did we know that we were actually 12 hours away from our destination, and we had no sleeping bags. I fortunately caught 5 trout from the kayak, and my buddy who's in the Coast Guard, he swamped his kayak in this 20-degree cold water. I mean, he come out of there, pulled his kayak out, had to turn it over, and hypothermia within 5 minutes started setting in on him. So he's like, my Coast Guard training, if we don't get a fire built, I'm going to be dead, and this is going to be my end. So he said, we tried to pat a little more, and he's like, I just can't do it. His jaws, teeth are chattering. And so we pull up into this mud bank, and there's just thorns, just the thickest thorn bushes everywhere. So I had to pull our kayaks up in there. And then the only thing I had was a little wildlife guide, which is just a little book. It's kind of like a book like this, about that thick. And that's all we had for fire starter. And fortunately, I had some matches in my tackle box, but we managed to get a fire going. That was the hardest fire I ever had to light, because snow was on the ground, number one, and we had to find, we had to shake the wood off, get underneath stuff to find. And one of the good things you can do is break dead branches off of trees, because they don't sit on the ground and get soaked. So fortunately, we were able to get a fire going. And we ended up cutting open a Pepsi can. I think we had a fifth of Jim Beam with us too, or something. So, Vernon took a couple shots, and I got this fire roaring, dude. It was great. We ended up filleting some trout right there and cooking it on the soda can. I mean, it was as wild as it gets. And of course, it starts snowing again, and everything is soaked around us. Vern's drying off finally, thank goodness, because he would have, there was nowhere, no roads for miles. It would have been a bad turnout if we wouldn't have been able to keep ourselves alive. But just the art of building a fire, just that little thing saved, my buddy's life. But the next day we got on the river, we're all dry and warm and back to, and it took 8.5, almost 9 hours to get to where we put out. So fortunately, we wouldn't have made it anyways. That's just one of those things you take for granted. And being that I didn't live down here, I had no idea, what the length of time that you're going to be floating was. So it's best to check out maps, don't let that happen to you. Make sure you read maps, get times, how long is something. But yeah, survival is just, and people don't think about it very often. They've got their electric, they've got their, we just had a power outage for 24 hours. And fortunately, I have a backup generator, and I know the neighbor, he had to take the family and go stay somewhere else, because, it's not easy. You lose power, you lose any of these comforts, these creature comforts, and your whole world gets turned upside down and fast. It doesn't take long to get cold in the house when you have no heat and it's 20 degrees outside. So, these kinds of things that you can prep for on a basic survival mode as well. I recommend folks look into it. But yeah, Caleb, so where are you at now? Where are you currently?
I am still doing my gypsy thing.
The art of the Shenku warrior.
Yes.
Right on. Good deal. Well, I guess this is a good time. We can, real quick, I'm going to just roll, since we were talking about guns and we're both supporters of the Second Amendment, you could say. I'm going to roll a little video that we took, and just this is us at the shooting range that you helped me build. So we'll be right back. It's getting close to July 4th, which is a celebration of a free people's independence from tyrannical government. In times like these, it suits us well to be reminded and to always remember that freedom truly isn't free, it's a state of mind. And if you acquiesce to the dictates of tyrants, then you will suffer the scourge of their wrath and their impropriety set against your soul. They are demons, and there are demons walking and running amok in mankind. That's why things like the firearm were invented, not just for conquest, but for more like in natural law, defense. Defense is a natural right of every human. Just like every insect, every animal, every creature has a defensive mechanism. So must man.
God is calling. Underneath the war pigs crawling, begging mercies for the sick. Satan spreads his wings. Oh Lord, yeah.
5 out of 5. Well, I do got to say that you were nailing it that day. You're doing a straight barrel sight too on that shot. So when you have a scope, you're sort of at a little bit of an advantage, but you nailed 4 out of 5 on one of those rounds. That was great for straight down the barrel, dude. So don't fuck with Caleb is the lesson in that video. But hey, I want to show you something real quick. Since we're both enthusiasts, I'm going to show you my latest build real fast here. It's got a infrared scope. Got the stand. Let me get a light on here, an extra light. So we need to get together and do some target practice again, brother.
Yeah, definitely.
Yep. So what's your favorite rifle? Since we're talking ballistics here.
I haven't shot enough to say. I've never shot a 308, and I have a feeling that I would like those a lot.
Right on.
But
what did we shoot over at Gary's that day?
Oh fuck, he had like some sort of bolt action. I think he had a 30-06 bolt action. Yeah.
I'm going to run that video real quick, and then we'll just move along into the next topics. But this is cool too, because these are bringing back memories, but it was so cool hanging out with you, dude, and doing this actual target practice, because I didn't have anybody to shoot with. I've shot with Gary before, of course, but it had been a while. So when you showed up and you're like, you start pulling out duplicate things that I got, and I'm like, oh my God, dude, let's build a range and go shooting. So here goes that next video. We'll be right back.
Took my first breath where the muddy rises, spills into Mexico. The skyline is colored by chemical plants. Put bread on the table of the working man, where the working man does his best to provide safety and shelter for kids and a wife. Giving a little of a soul every day, making overtime to keep the wolves away.
I spent 22 years teaching soldiers to shoot. Aim at his neck, Matt. Right in the neck. Aim at the exact same spot. There you go.
Well, I was barely 13 when the company man tried to dig my daddy's grave. It happened on a French-owned tanker ship, spilling poison into Galveston Bay, where the liquid fire filled his lungs and his eyes silenced anymore.
Film what I got.
Cold
Yep.
and gritty, death stinging pain. We fought like hell to keep the wolves away.
Oh, look at that. One, three. Is that not badass?
Ha, cool stuff, dude. I know you were dialing your gun in that day. You're dialing in the sight and stuff, and so you were
My
working
scope
on
was a
that.
piece of crap.
Did you ever get a new one?
No, I just switched to using iron sights, and then I got a red dot, which seems to
Oh,
be
cool.
pretty good.
Right.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the rifle's pretty much built for the ranges it's built for. Really, is you don't need a scope. I mean, the scope makes it nice because you can zoom in, which is good, but you don't necessarily need it,
Right.
Yeah.
Well, cool. All right, we're gonna move out of ballistics and weapons and weaponry and survival into some more of the cerebral side of the world of Caleb, and let's get into a little bit about what you're up to. Your last appearance on Slave, you covered a very interesting guy by the name of Baron Karl Reichenbach, and you also have a lot of background when it comes to Wilhelm Reich, which is great because that's a guy I've yet to really study in an in-depth way. But there's certain things about all these guys that, in a sense, parallel some of the things Walter Russell said, especially concerning, the ode that Reichenbach talked about, the orgone that Reich talks about, and then the still magnetic light that Russell talks about. So why don't you pick a starting point that you'd like to begin? You could start with Charles Konia as well. A lot of different folks that you can discuss and give us a little background on.
Yeah. So, I think what sparked the interest was Michael Tsarian's work about the Druids, and the fact that the Druids understood the connections between the psychic and the physical, and the astrological. So I I'd previously even been interested in why does astrology work? Because when I was a teenager, my family and close group of friends, we were checking each other's horoscopes out, and um, I was the only one who needed to needed to. I felt like this need to like, well, why does it work like that, or like um, what's the basis of even saying that, you know, an Aries is going to be like this, or um, like why? So um, that was re-sparked again when um, Michael Desarian was talking about the Druids. So um, unfortunately, there's no there's no there's like we can't go talk to a druid to ask him like what he knew, or go talk to a druid and have him teach us or whatever. um, they were pretty much wiped out, and you can gather people are putting together the history of the druids back together again. um, there there's people who are really diving deep into what's left, but there's, as far as written records and actual documentation and things, is going to get you so far, but you can work back into it sort of backwards by just putting yourself in their shoes. You know, what were the natural phenomena that they were observing? They were essentially natural scientists, naturalists, and it's evident that they um, had a close relationship with nature, which was an integral part of um, their tradition. So I kind of work at it from both ends of the puzzle. So that's why it's valuable to look at the works of, say, Reich, Victor Schauberger, um, Baron Karl Reichenbach, and others, because a lot of what people are discovering today is going to be essentially the same as what the Druids were discovering in their time, because obviously the laws of nature will remain the same, even if the people who who discovered those laws originally were wiped out. That doesn't mean that those laws of the universe can't be rediscovered again later on.
Right, right. It seems like no matter how much they try to push it down or destroy knowledge, it always has a way of creeping back up out of the ground, no matter how deep you bury it. Are there any good repositories online that are trying to reassemble this druidic outlook that you can recommend, or is it more or less still pretty scattered to the wind and yet to really fully emerge as a like a database of either written material, the practices, things of that nature?
Well, I think there's something called the Order of Bards and Ovates, which has a website, and they don't seem very interesting to me. Uh, it's like with anything, like any of the pagan elements of the past. Of course, there's clubs and stuff that are out there, but um, it almost seems like you could chart a graph, like the more club like and membership like, or like group think sort of thing it is, the less actual of a trajectory to discovery that it actually has, like discovering new new revelations about the past and about the sciences and about the knowledge itself. So
That's
I do recommend one that's called the Brehan Academy, though. I do recommend people check that out. That's actually this is an example of one dude who has collated a lot and actually put together an online course on his own website. I recommend that, and that just kind of goes with what I said. It's not like he's trying to start some sort of club or something, you know.
right. And that's really, something you notice in a lot of organizations and religions, right? You got this really enlightened person and they give you this message. It's really great. And then the followers come along and they fuck it up, because it's this group mindset who doesn't really understand the real nature of what is trying to be. And so they automatically think, well, we can preserve it and make it better, or we can edit it because of the political points of view that are dominating the culture of the time. That's what I ran into when I went to the university. Was it was basically running on life support because a previous administration had decided that they knew better than Walter Russell what his words should say. And so they started changing things, and one could say that I got there in the nick of time to put that fire out and undid those changes before they were undoable, before they were unreversible. Because once something changes and you lose sight of the previous version, then that edited version becomes the version that gets passed down through history. And that's probably a lot of the reason why some of these organizations, and they say the road to hell is paved with good intentions, but it's never paved with clarity. And the problem is you get people whose own egos are more important. They're more important than the protection of the reason for which the organization was founded. And then you end up with people wanting to edit things because somebody might be offended by what this person says. Like, the Russells weren't people that held back on expressing their views about homosexuality, for instance. And I can't tell you how many calls came into the university, people demanding that we take those words out of the teachings. And I said, no, absolutely not. We're not going to take a single word out of it. Because, at that point, if you start looking at the great masters, like let's just say Mozart, for instance, and somebody's offended by his symphony in C minor or whatever, or a piano concerto, and I want those notes taken out because they're offensive. Well, then you completely ruin what the man wanted to put out there. So that's something you see run a little rampant in the left, not little rampant, very rampant, as they tear statues down and try to destroy history. You can always tell what the truth
Well,
is.
they had a movie
That's what
called
they want to dismantle.
they had a movie called I Married a Communist. And they have a scene in there where they're having a meeting. The communists are having a meeting, and somebody starts quoting Karl Marx,
Ooh.
but it goes against what they're saying in the meeting. They take them out in the hallway and like fucking beat the shit out of them. Because this is like, but it's Karl Marx, and they're like, yeah, but you're going against the party.
That's funny. That is so true too. Take him out and shoot him. Why? I was quoting our leader. He's not the leader anymore. It's up to our interpretation. Yeah, totally, dude. So yeah, that's, you put these great minds out there and there's always people that come to edit them because they must make them conform to the mores of the people, which just mean the ways, the morals, the ways of the people are the morals of that time period, and obviously like parties, they change, polarities change, parties change. What used to be for the working man is now against the working man, so on and so forth. Herbert Spencer pointed that out in The Man versus the State real well, about how, the Tories and the conservatives were, two parties that eventually changed their entire points of view and switched. It's an interesting thing, but these are, I guess, cycles that happen over time. So, who do you want to start with? You want to go into Charles Konia a little
I
bit?
just want to add a comment there. Is
Sure.
that they've conditioned us for so long
Mm.
to that all you can expect a politician for something to come out of a politician's mouth is just so dry and meaningless and substanceless that when somebody like Trump comes in, which really the stuff he says isn't that, there's not a super amount of substance, like from a realistic standpoint, but it's still 1,000 times more than what we're used to. So that's how. That just shows how they've kept it on such a low level that all of this switchery and flip flopping and everything, it's just bullshit. So until I find one who literally talks the way that a common person would talk, then I'm not interested. Who could literally have a conversation without that politician persona thing. I don't know.
Well,
But moving on. Yes.
It's got to be difficult for these people because they're sort of like real-time editing reality, and I sort of attacked that point in my recent documentary, Dispelling Dimensional Madness, which I'll just refer to DDM from now on going forward. But in DDM, I actually call that out, that when you can't face reality, you have to edit it. And then the more you edit it, the more insane it becomes and the harder it is to, fit yourself into your own editing, right? It's called being untruthful, I guess you could say, or inauthentic is a better word to use. And I know Reich was big into authenticity. So why don't we move a little bit into that? And just, I know you're well versed. Have you read all of Reich's books, or you still got some more to go?
Not by any means, no.
Okay.
I just keep it fresh because I refer to his work all the time. But oh man, his work is voluminous.
Mhm.
It's very it's like, so no, that'll take actually a lot of dedication to read all of his books.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I know he's got like 4 or 5 major ones that are pretty well known. Function of the Orgasms, Hey Little Man. I've got them all on the shelf, and like I said, my reading list is about 35 miles long. So at some point,
I go really slow because I have to read, say, a chapter like a whole bunch of times, so that way I really know that I get what he's saying.
understand.
Yeah. Probably Walter Russell's the same way with some of his stuff, I bet.
Yeah,
I
leaves
bet.
leaves you going, wow. And you just have to read it again. You gotta absorb it. But so what, from looking at Wilhelm Reich and the orgone, maybe we could talk about that a little bit, because I had a buddy who wanted to send me an orgone machine that he built based on Reich's own description of how he built his, with the steel wool and the inside compartment. And he ended up passing away, and that never did come to fruition. But I found it very interesting because it's, not only the claims of the healing side of all this, but the orgone itself being in relation to like what Walter Russell called the still magnetic light, and again what Reichenbach calls the ode. Maybe you could talk about that a little bit, the orgone, and what you discovered with your research on it.
Well, it would be something the Druids would have known about. The ode also would be something the Druids would have known about, because the Druids were they were observers. They were observers of the stars. They were observers of mathematics, geometry, and nature. And with their megaliths, those were roofless temples, and the stone circles were designed in order to actually observe the stars, because when you line up certain stones, when you have the stone set up to line, you can actually make accurate measurements of the stars. So I think, with let's take it to Baron Karl Reichenbach and the Ode. He talks about observations where you can actually see this energy in the dark after you've been in the dark for an extended period of time, 3 to 4 hours. Certain people, not everyone, but certain people will be able to see ode, especially coming out of magnets and crystals. And it's a polarity. So from the point of a crystal, you will have a blue flame, a blue misty flame sort of issuing out. And you'll be some people will be able to see this. And from the base of the crystal, it'll be a yellow-red misty type of flame. And the same thing with a magnet. The north pole of a magnet will be the blue, and the south pole will be a yellow-red. Now, most articles on the internet will claim that ode is the same thing as orgone. I had a problem with that originally, because Reich only describes orgone as being blue. And if Reich has ever mentioned anything as being the opposite of orgone, it wasn't a polarity per se. His opposite for orgone was DOR, which means deadly orgone radiation, which is a colorless sort of void type of thing. So this is where pathogenic organisms generate from, and pathogenic organisms and viruses are actually orgone hungry. And his microscopic observation showed that the immune response to pathogenic organisms and viruses is to send T cells, which are highly charged orgone cells, to the virus, and the orgone sort of gets sucked out of the immune cell into the virus, but because the virus is orgone hungry, right? But that orgone actually causes it to sort of like glutenate, and it just like clumps together, and then it becomes non-deadly anymore. So I wasn't ready to accept that orgone and ode were the same thing. However, I kind of changed my mind recently as I was reading some more of Wilhelm Reich's work. In one place, he writes that he one time actually, sort of by accident, he had been using the orgone accumulator,
Hmm.
and then it was at night, and he had the lights turned off. And after his eyes adjusted to the dark, he actually saw the blue orgone.
Hmm.
So the significant part of that is that he only writes about making that observation once. So whereas Reichenbach has made thousands of observations of this type, and it's maybe warranted to say that if Reich had made more of those types of observations, he also would have seen the opposite pole of the blue ray, so to speak, or the blue flame, and he would have also seen the yellow-red flame from the other side. So, with that in mind, it is possible that Reich was just focused on the orgone, and he knew it as being blue, and he had never really thought of it as being sort of like a polarity or anything. But maybe you could. I'm thinking. So I'm wondering, how do I actually interpret this? Maybe it's primarily blue, and the polarity phenomenon is just the I don't know, because this question came up for me a few years ago when I was wondering, like, magnets. What's the actual difference between a north pole of a magnet and a south pole of a magnet? I mean, I couldn't find any. Like, it was just arbitrary. So actually, Reichenbach's observations are the first place I've ever seen an actual difference between what a North Pole and a South Pole is. That's not just an arbitrary classification. You know,
That's very interesting because I'm actually doing a lot of research myself over the last couple of years with magnets, and I'll just show you an example. But here's a cylindrical magnet. I'm sure these come in pairs. You can buy them. They're like $2 or $3 for a pair of these. And you can get some magnetic viewing film, which is like a green paper that has, I think, a very thin layer of iron filings in a liquid inside. So when you want to see the actual magnetic field, like that's showing you the magnetic field around the cylindrical magnet, right?
yeah,
And then if I turn it, okay, there's that white line in the middle.
yeah,
You're actually seeing the still magnetic light that Walter Russell talks about, which is the same as the dividing light in you. If you could develop a piece of paper that could show your magnetic hemisphere, you would also see that white light straight down, because that white light centers any two hemispheres. Anywhere there's a division in that stillness or that still magnetic light, you're going to find. Let's see if I can get that to show up. This is kind of tough with the lighting. Let me kick this on. Okay, so there's
kind of reflecting off of the off of the computer too much.
right.
It's really not going to show up. There's too much light in the room.
There we go. You can see around the magnet, and then there's halfway through the magnet.
It's not really working, man. It's
So
kind of not working.
I can get
All I see is my own face reflected off.
But that is very cool because all magnets will show you that. They're going to show you the block wall. And the
Yeah.
black wall is the location of Walter Russell's still magnetic light, or the creator, which is at 90 degrees, right? So
Yeah.
there's a dividing line, dead center of this magnet, and then there's two hemispheres, the North and the South Pole. But
Well,
those are represented by, in the color
one
spectrum,
thing I
red
came
and
across,
blue.
the unfortunate thing with magnets, though, is that if you were to chip a piece of that magnet off, it
Mhm.
wouldn't matter which side of the magnet you chipped it off of.
Creates another North and South,
Yeah. So
which puts the
there
flat
might
Earth in
there might
trouble.
be there might be some sort of perfect magnet out there where, I don't know, like, I guess the perfect magnet would be one where if you chipped a piece off of the north side, it would stay as just north. But I guess I don't know if that's even possible. It would still make a south,
It
right?
would still have a North and South. It would be just a smaller North and South.
Yeah.
But you'd still have a dividing line. And if you think of the same with cells, there is a DC voltage to the body as well. And when your cells depolarize or enter and then more into a radiative than a charging, then you end up sick. And so you get a lowering of your body voltage, which is exactly what these vaccines do. They lower the body's voltage, which lowers your immune system response. Because again, people don't understand that we are electric beings in an electric universe.
Well, it's
But
interesting in those alchemical drawings, they have the person who has like black on the one side and white on the other.
Mhm.
And I've been thinking about this a lot kind of lately, is that if you have a battery, you have the positive and the negative, and what gives that the power is the fact that they're not in the same chamber, they're separated,
Correct.
which gives it the potential.
Yeah.
Whereas if it's all just like, if you were to just mix it all together in one big thing, it would just like fizzle out, and it
Yeah,
wouldn't
it wouldn't
really
do
have
anything. So that again, as polarity is taught by Russell, that in order for there to be any body in existence, you have to set up an interchange and create polarity. Because if you don't have polarity, there's no interchange, sequential interchange, which means there's no rhythmic balanced interchange, and then there's no body. So like when we go to sleep at night, we're depolarized. By depolarizing through action all day long, we have to lay down horizontally on the ground, basically in that still white light at 90 degrees, like you lay a cell phone down to charge it, right? Same thing. You're laying your body down to charge it. Wildlife lays down. So there's all these examples. You go 90 degrees and you recharge during your rest half of your cycle, which is the death half. And in death is the life-giving recharging, which you then will wake up in the morning still in a charging state until you reach a point in the day where discharge overtakes charge, and you do it again sequentially. So there's your polarization in the human body. And I was just going to say that's one of the reasons flat Earth has really no understanding of polarity, because there are no monopoles in nature. There's always a pole in space if there's no pole in a body. But to date, there is no example of a monopole that you can hold in your hand in the shape of a magnet. And that sort of, to me, is a huge red flag, because again, that's a whole nother subject for a whole nother thing. But magnets will reveal, the doubly charged nature of all bodies in existence. And that double charge is the twin opposing vortice model, which compresses vacuity into a tightly compacted matter and then ejects heat at 90 degrees. So all systems give heat off at 90 degrees. You put the thermometer under your tongue, dead center, right? So that we can breathe in cold air through two nostrils that charges the air, oxygenates the blood, and then we exhale through the mouth, which is where the heat's given off at the equator. So the two become one, and the one becomes two again, and it's a back and forth and interchange even between the very cycles of our own bodies. So Wilhelm Reich was fascinating in the sense that, I've heard a lot about him despite not having read thoroughly his work, but the man was, obviously railroaded. His books, his work, his collected materials, research notes were burned. He was labeled a communist by the FBI, who raided him. And never in the history of this country has there been a man like that who was just targeted in that way, especially for an academic, somebody of that kind of a caliber mindset. But apparently he was doing something that got their attention. So
I think the people who were planning for the 60s sexual revolution to happen had to get him out of the way first, because he had a book called The Sexual Revolution.
Mhm.
And he had a book called Children of the Future, which gives recognition to childhood sexual actual needs, as far as among their own age group. Whereas after they got rid of Wilhelm Reich, they came out with Alfred Kinsey, and then Alfred Kinsey did childhood sexual studies, which were non-scientific, yet he laid the foundation for a lot of the leftist slant views on childhood sexuality. But to add insult to injury, they also made Alfred Kinsey have like a certain a similar hairstyle, which to the general public just sort of on a subliminal level contaminated the image of Reich, because it gave everyone an easy association. And even now they're lumping them both together as being representative of the same mindset, which they're not. And then they came out with this 60s sexual revolution, which if Reich had still been around, he would have had a lot to say about that.
I can only imagine what some of these guys would say about.
There's so many people. It's like, oh man, I wish they had just stayed alive for,
right.
Because
I asked myself that, what would Walter think of the state of science currently? And, all you can do is sort of just, you come to know their writings, you come to know their viewpoints, you weigh them against nature, and you say, okay, this works, right? Or it doesn't work. But really, you any of this new stuff, let's just say the stuff that has replaced the stuff that used to work, is just all bollocks. It just doesn't fit. It doesn't work well with nature, doesn't jive, if you will. And that reminds me, child sexual studies, there was a Dr. John William Money. His work in the 50s, around probably the time after Wilhelm Reich was pushed to the side, he comes out and starts pushing theories on constructs of there being more than two genders. So you have your roots of the whole gender ideology beginning in the mid to late 50s. And he actually worked with two young boys who were brothers. I believe they were twins. And one committed suicide at 38 and the other died in an overdose at 36. But the stuff he did with these kids was just beyond the pale. I mean, it was disgusting. And this, he claimed it was scientific research, but it was a lot more than that, if you ask me. Because, anybody whose patient commits suicide should immediately be scorned and questioned. But this guy still hailed as one of the heroes of leftism and the gender benders out there.
what year did he do
I want to
this?
say 1956. In 65, he published. I'm sorry, he established the John Hopkins Gender Identity Clinic. but he had started as a professor of pediatrics as early as 1951 until his death. He authored 2 papers between 1960 and 61 called Incongruous Gender Role, Non-Genital Manifestations in Prebuteral Boys. So, I mean, it's,
So they were already getting their shit fired up.
they were,
I even wonder if like
decades ago.
some of the fucking Nazis that they got smuggled in after World War II, which I'm sure your audience might probably already know about, the fact that, you know, Operation Paperclip after World War II, they started bringing Nazis into the United States for certain purposes, and their agendas, like some of the hidden agendas of which the Nazis were into all sorts of crazy ideas. They actually found a foothold over here. People don't realize. So I wonder if that like was a factor in that thing getting fired up, because you said 1951. That would fit. That would kind of fit. What country is he from?
Sweden, oh, no, I'm sorry, New Zealand.
Oh, okay.
But here in the 3rd paragraph, you'll see that, our 2nd paragraph, let me highlight it here. He working with endocrinologist Claude Midgen. Money established the Johns Hopkins Gender Identity Clinic, the first clinic in the United States to perform sexual reassignment surgeries on both infants and adults. I mean, and this, you're talking 1960, you know, back in the late 50s too. Married briefly, had no children, but was, you know, it's kind of just, you can read it yourself, guys. I mean, this stuff has its roots going far, far back, further than what they, you know, this isn't just some new fad that popped on the scene, but even up to the point in where they demolished the Twin Towers, right? And which is a giant binary. It represents like a male and a female, and they demolish it and then replace the 2 with 1, which are basically both genders, with the pointing triangles down and the pointing triangles up, you know, and call it the unitower. It was sort of a demolishing of, you could say, the binary. We talked about that on the last TEC
Think about the
podcast.
battery, the alchemical with the black on the one side of the body,
Yeah,
and the white on the other. That gives you the possibility to have a charge like a battery. But if you mix the black and the white together and all you have is gray, there's not going to be a lot of energy there, is there? It's going to be gone. But a thing I'll say about the childhood sexual research that Reich was doing, you can read it. You can read his book called Children of the Future, which is specifically about that. And it's not the same as these other guys. I'll just say, basically, you can think of it like firearms. If you ban firearms and make firearms illegal, that's not going to stop the criminals from getting firearms. It's just going to stop the good guys from getting firearms.
right.
Same thing is going to happen in a school, whether it be a middle school or a high school or any sort of arrangement with children of that age, is that you can say, no, that's not allowed. That's only going to stop the good ones from doing it. It's not going to stop the bad ones from doing it.
Well,
Same
eventually,
concept.
the good ones become the bad ones, at least by the way they're labeled, you know. And
Right.
so, what is good is actually now referred to collectively as not good, and we all know better, of course, because again, certain things like tradition, you can't really be a traditionalist if you don't practice traditionalism. But you know, survival is one of the most ancient traditions known to man. hunting for one's food,
And
foraging.
so is nomadism.
Exactly.
There's
Good
another
skill
way
to
there's
have.
another way to look at human history, which is agriculturalists versus hunter gatherers, and uh, they're actually enemies. The uh, the agriculturalists are the enemies of the hunter gatherers because you know um, almost on the same level that feminists claim as the patriarchy being the enemy, which is ludicrous, but almost on that level, it actually is the case between the hunter gatherer type versus the agriculturalists, because what were the Native Americans before we got here? They were nomadics. They had each tribe had like 4 different locations for their tribe, one for each season,
Mhm.
because certain landscapes afford better advantages during the summer than they do during the winter, and better advantages during the spring than they do during the autumn. And to have a successful tribe live as hunter gatherers, you actually have to be a steward of the land, um, which means that you have to take care of the land, um, you know, which is to a degree is the same as same principle with agriculture, but we know that agriculture is way more devastating to the ecology. Um, and vegetarians should think about,
Especially the chemical. Yeah.
yes, and vegetarians should think about the fact that they can be a vegetarian and think that they don't hurt animals, but the amount of habitat that had to be displaced in order to grow those crops is a lot more than simply shooting one animal.
Right.
Um, and and also the philosophy of hunting is that you actually are performing a necessary function for the health of that herd. Um, Now, that's not to say sport hunters. The difference being
Right.
is that a conscientious sustenance hunter will take the weak of the herd, and that actually makes the herd genetically stronger. Now, a sport hunter will take the strongest, biggest, most beautiful member of the herd with the biggest rack,
Which weakens the herd
and
over.
that weakens the herd.
Right.
Yeah, it's pretty deep.
So it comes down to really, and love him or hate him, Ted Nugent, he went on a rant, and I posted that on my Telegram recently about how, the soy farmers, they kill voles, they kill moles, they kill rats, mice, turtles, snakes, everything's wiped out in that field. Whatever doesn't survive, the combines driving, you'll see the seagulls and everything else behind the combines eating the shit out of all the dead animals it kills. Whatever they don't kill with the combine, they poison with the Monsanto spray just to get the tofu to market. So really, go back to hunter gatherer and uh, the first agriculture. You could say that, and I guess historians tend to draw on this too, but agriculture back to Sumerian days, if you believe that version of history, says that, the agriculturalists who left the nomadic hunter gatherer lifestyles were the reason for cities being constructed, cities being large wombs, basically womb metaphors for people to be comfortable in, to know where everything is, to have the safety. And so you could see where theoretically nomadic tribe, say, comes into contact with a fixed city kind of tribal setting that's newly emerged, let's say, and there's instantly a conflict, right? Because they're just two different groups altogether. So that's an interesting point to consider.
Yes.
What are your thoughts on ancient civilizations? Let's say like Atlantis. I know Michael Tsarian's book. We both have the actual physical book, which seems a rarity these days. But I was reading Velikovsky when I discovered Michael's work, and I just finished it actually, and I did some searching about and discovered his Atlantis alien visitation book, which was wonderful. And so, we both looked at that when you were here visiting, but maybe we just briefly touch on Velikovsky's work and, catastrophism, maybe a little bit of the ancient world from your perspective.
Yeah. Well, the cataclysms, there's all sorts of evidence for that. And what is a theory these days about Pangea?
That's the continental drift where everything was one.
Right.
If you look at growth, periodicity of growth in nature, things do grow bigger over time until a certain point where the death half of their life takes over. So discharge becomes stronger in periodicity or predominance. So you could almost envision, and again, I look at the universe in a slightly different way than, of course, much different way than academic physicists do, but the Russell perspective, which just seems so seamless to me, and until I'm presented with a better model, I'm going to hold to it, because planets in that cosmology are born from the sun, as opposed to just gases cooling from a big bang, and there happens, Saturn happens to form, or Mercury happens to form just because gas cooled. And actually, in the Russell cosmogony, planets are the children of stars, of the sun, the central sun of the system. So one would look at the system through a Russell perspective, our solar system, and say that the sun has 9 children, and then those planets, some of them have grandchildren. There's 30 plus moons for Jupiter, which also has rings. Saturn, being an older planet than Jupiter, has more rings, more moons, and so on and so forth. And eventually those moons, once you get out to the orbit of Neptune and Pluto, those moons will become so erratic in their orbit around the parent that they leave and become comets that return to plunge into the sun. So it's a seamless cosmology, which again is a really good model, because anything in nature, does a baby deer appear because gas is cool, or is it born from its mother? Does a human appear from cooling gases, or is it born from its mother? So why wouldn't we apply the as above, so below to the planets themselves? And that's where mainstream physics breaks from reality into this fantasy world of delusion, which isn't a tenable, workable cosmological genesis that explains anything in terms that are understandable to average people. So who was it? I think Russell said, if you can't explain the universe to a 7-year-old, you have no business being a cosmologist. So I guess the simple way to look at it would be, how does nature work? Apply that to the universe, and then you're going to have a much more closer to reality conceptual structure than, say, guessing at non-dimensional, non-existent hypercubes, higher dimensions, and forces like dark matter and things like that have no existence whatsoever.
Yeah. Pangea, though, until recently, I thought Pangea idea was ridiculous. And that's just because of the way I heard of it first was that, the slow, gradual version, which is that even now that they say that the continents are still drifting apart at a rate of like inches per year. But they said that that's how it's separated and originally. It's just that was like this, and then it just inch by inch started moving apart. That just seemed ridiculous to me because it's the fucking Atlantic Ocean, dude. That's a long ass distance, man. But with catastrophism, it makes more sense. When you look at the coast, it's like there's a spot on Africa, like midway up the line, and there's this massive fucking crater right there. And there's strange things that happened. The longest line that you can draw across land on Earth is a line which stretches from the west coast of Africa all the way to the east coast of Russia. And it goes right through the Great Pyramid. And the Great Pyramid actually sits on the point, which is the golden ratio, 1 to 1.618. So it seems that the cataclysm actually involved powers which involved the golden ratio. So everybody thinks that the golden ratio is this, divine mathematics and everything. And it's like holy or whatever. Well, whatever it is it unleashed a force that ripped the continent apart of Pangea because it left it to where there's a line which is bisected by the golden ratio with the Great Pyramid. And if you pull up the Novocastrian channel, this is where me and the Novocastrian have been talking a lot about this. And we've done 3 interviews so far that have been published. So we get into Immanuel Velikovsky here. If you scroll down, go to videos and scroll down. He's taken and made shorter versions. Second row, third to the right, weapons of catastrophe. Yeah, so we've done some things there. And if I think it would be a good place to, if you've never heard of the catastrophism, it'd be good to check these out because it's very visual, and we make references to people who've done it a lot better than we did. But rather than maybe picking up a big thick book about it to start with, you can check these out, and they're very visual, and we make references to everything.
Good deal.
Yeah,
you had mentioned the Pangea. I would just say Russell's science could explain that from that scientific perspective, where Jupiter, Saturn, these larger planets were once the size of Earth and perhaps even the size of Venus or Mercury, and that all things grow over time. So as they grow, you could see where it could fit, and that model could fit to explain Pangea, being that it cracked and eventually water forms and expansion occurs. But there's also the possibility of unnatural expansions. When asked the gardener of Walter Russell, Charles, forgive me, I forget his name, but he asked Dr. Russell, what happened to the planet between Mars and Jupiter? And Doctor looked at him sternly in the face and said, it did not explode from natural causes. So certainly that means whatever race was on there, if he's correct, blew their planet to pieces.
Walter Russell said that?
Yeah.
Wow.
He also acknowledged that there were ancient races on the planet and that we'd find civilizations under the Gobi Desert that were far more advanced than anything that's here today, which is very interesting because, you know, a lot of these guys, their points of view cross connect, you know, like again, um, Velikovsky and Reichenbach and um, Wilhelm Reich. You have these different minds that have they sort of tackled the same questions, but from their own unique angles. You know, like I guess it's the old adage, the philosophical questions that drive humanity. But it seems like that everybody is on that who's in that realm of a giant asks themselves those questions and tries to come up. And certainly there's cross connections between these great minds that help, you know, people like us to understand better, you know, what is the universe in which we live and how can I best apply myself for it.
Yes.
So why don't we talk about Mr. Charles Konia? You sent a page to me on him, and he's a very interesting fella. And he's got quite a lot of writings. You can read the editorials, the articles, and he goes into a lot of interesting subjects that might have a lot to do with, you know, our current state of things. Why don't you give a brief background on him?
Well, it's a good primer to understand um, a lot of things. One is understanding why liberals are the way they are and why conservatives are the way they are. And I can read to you a quote. It's not from Charles Konia himself, but it's from one of his colleagues.
Okay.
And it's pretty much what Charles Konia would say as well. And this will give you an introduction to the point of view. He says Baker's description of the social character types forms the cornerstone of our understanding of the liberal and conservative. The liberal character tends toward a mechanistic explanation of natural phenomena, and the conservative toward a mystical one. The mechanist, separated from his core, lives largely in his intellect. He cannot penetrate through to natural functioning, except in a machine-like manner. This is because he is cut off from sensation and emotion. His energy is largely drawn up into his head, and his thinking is stuck in a narrow, superficial realm, and the realm of secondary material functioning. He cannot make contact with his core because his biologic energies are severely blocked. The conservative individual, on the other hand, tends to be mystical and lives in the core and middle layers of his structure. But because of the distribution of his armoring, full contact cannot be achieved. He thinks and functions in quite a different fashion than does the mechanist, and is disposed towards spirituality and religion. He yearns to merge with the cosmos because he has retained core contact. Unlike the mechanist, the mystic tends to deal with concepts not of this world and comes to use words that do not correspond to anything real. This leads to a paradox because his thinking, while giving the appearance of going very deeply into the very essence of things, really remains superficial. He only seems to be furnishing a deep and profound understanding. By seeming to enter the depths, mysticism provides an illusion of well-being. This serves to reduce anxiety and promote the feeling of oneness with the universe. The I block, which is intrinsic to mysticism, alters perception and thought and brings about a state of decreased contact. A great attraction of mysticism is its power to stop thinking. Altered perception, and with it altered thinking, allow one's energy to become diffused and extended outward. This produces the feeling of merging with God or the Absolute. So, um, the more you read what these guys have to say, you start to develop a foundational understanding of certain um, uh, factors that are have a tremendous consequence to what a person ends up sort of being and viewing the world. And you sort of, it helps because it helps you not get distracted by all of the highways and byways of what a person says they think or what their opinions are and what their standpoint is on this or that. Um, because you kind of pay less attention to what the person says and pay more attention to why they say it, and the reason why they say this or that or have a certain standpoint is because of the way that their bioenergy is actually distributed. So it's energy. It's like the person's energetic makeup, which can be it can be diagnosed, and the way that it is, there's kind of two basic things you need to understand is the core periphery concept, which is that you have three layers. The core layer of energy, the secondary destructive layer of energy or armoring, and the superficial layer. So certain people, like they were describing just then, the mechanist, they actually have no contact with their core whatsoever. And that actually can be, yeah, it can be, it's true for a lot of people. So they actually don't have contact with their core. And so there's those three layers, and they speak at length about the three layers. That's one of the most important concepts to understand is the three layers. Another concept is armoring, which is the secondary layer. So the secondary layer actually is the armoring, but armoring has 7 segments which go from the top down. The ocular segment, which is what they were just talking about, the eye block, they called it the eye block. It's the ocular armoring.
Mhm.
And that goes a long way to distort perception, and it even distorts contact between people, because if you have an ocular block and I have an ocular block and we're trying to communicate together, it's all going to be distorted from the ocular block, from the eyes. So don't want to get biblical, but even the Bible says, if thine eye be single, thy whole body shall be full of light, and if thy eye be dark, then you'll be full of evil. So yeah, you have the eye segment. You have the oral segment, which actually goes around all the way to the back of the neck, and the throat, the chest, the diaphragm, the belly, and the genital. So that's 7 rings. Therapy
Sort of lines up with the traditional chakra system.
Yeah,
Wouldn't you say? Yeah.
probably. I don't think Reich. I've never seen Reich actually mention it, but
Right.
I mean, come on, it's got to be related.
Well, there's nerve ganglia too that, 7 major points along the spine where masses of nerve ganglia come
Yeah.
together. So it's more than just a, Eastern, foo-foo or something. It actually has biological evidences,
Yeah.
But yeah, these blocks and things, as you say, Yeah, people use the word mystic too, there's of course many connotations, but it's interesting because in a lot of terminologies, just the word mystic itself, from a Russell perspective, could mean somebody who's an artist, a creator, who's not got any of the ocular blocks or necessarily armoring or the other factors. And then you could say in the same word that guy's a hermit, which is hermetic, right? Which means he's disconnected from reality and lives alone in a shack in the woods and has nothing to do with anybody. So there's sort of there's always the polarity between, um, if you point out the ends and strive for the middle, you're going to end up probably better off because you're looking for balance. So, but it's just interesting how each word, the word mystic, even the word doctor, the word uh, academician could mean a lot of things based on the
Yes.
connotation.
No, but at least they're specific about what they mean by mystic.
Right.
So if they were to say come across Michael Desarian has a premium presentation on Unslaved called Mysticism,
Yeah, it's
and
great.
I don't
Recommend it.
think I actually don't think that there would be any disagreement there because he's actually using it in a different but they both exactly specify exactly what they mean by that word. They're using it in different ways. And that's the thing, you can't get stuck on lingo because
Right.
anytime you cross into what someone else is teaching, they'll be using the same words, but they'll be defining it in the way that they mean it for it to be defined, which is okay, you know?
Right.
Yeah.
And there's your semantics. And also the English language is renowned for one word meaning 20 different things. So which connotation is it? And that's where discernment really comes in. But again, you got an aphomatic approach to knowledge as well. So you might use the term positively one moment and then negatively the next, depending on what you're trying to prove out, which, again, you just have to be discerning.
Yeah.
So what are you into? Where are you heading on your studies? What are your goalposts, things that you're going to complete, any projects, things like that coming up that you're into at the moment?
I'm just kind of lost in history right now. The
Pre-ancient or current
Yeah,
or yeah.
ancient stuff, and the way it's not like I have like this syllabus, to where it's like, oh, I'm going to sometimes I do it like that, but right now it's like I feel like I have a scent of something that I'm trying to seek out, like the gaps I'm seeing in history. So I don't even know what books I need to get to read or what. I'm just sort of like probing into this, gap in history, um, to see what actually was there. So um, it's working from the backside, so to speak, sort of like I was saying about the druids earlier. You
Right.
can't you can't you can't always just find your answers from a head-on approach. You have to ask the right questions, and um, I get there's a metaphor, that I've been seeing floating around lately. Is that in World War II, these planes came back, and they saw that all the holes were in these areas. So they said, well, let's put armor in those areas, extra armor. And then somebody else came and said, no, you need to put the armor in where the holes aren't at, because these are just the planes that made it back, right? So the planes that didn't make it back obviously got shot in the place where the holes aren't, you know. So you
Right.
yeah. And that's like with history, it's like there's a lot of gaps in history that um, deserve exploration
Yeah, for
because
sure.
they've there's a lot of history to get into that fills up a lot of space, but I still see gaps. You know.
Yeah, definitely. I just posted a meme yesterday. It says, yesterday is history, tomorrow is a mystery, today is a gift. Well,
Yes.
yeah, how can we understand the present if we don't understand the past? And how can we create a future if we neither have understanding of the past or the present? So I'd say that, studying history is one of the most important things a human being can do because it gives us some ability to understand the current dilemmas that we find ourselves in. Because, again, like John C. Money, that transgenderism didn't start in the year 2011. It started in 1920, actually. And you can research this stuff for yourself. And people might have their qualms with the Wikipedia or whatnot, but ironically, there's a lot of accurate information there. You still have to be discerning, maybe check it against other sources, Britannica and others. But
Started
um,
in the 18th dynasty in Egypt with Akhenaton.
yeah, even let's go back even farther, right? How
Yeah,
long
if you
has that
there,
been happening, right?
me and the Novocastrian have a forthcoming video. He's editing it right now.
I was just going to ask you, what projects do you want to promote? We're getting about to that time,
Yeah.
and
Flash up the Novocastrian up there one more time.
sure.
So people want to check out what I'm doing now, head on over to the Novocastrian. That's not my project. That's the Novocastrian, but I've been a guest with him, and this is a really cool project that we've been doing. We have one coming up soon. We have actually two in the works right now, hoping to do more. Also, you can check out Yucky Hagstrom. I'll send you a link real quick. Let me pull it
Okay.
up. Unslaved. Obviously, everybody should check that out. Some of my older interviews on Unslaved are under Caleb Colley. My name, I had to change my name in order to reflect my true ancestry. So,
And you did that while you were staying here, which was really cool because
yes.
I had asked you at the beginning of the show if you wanted to touch on that, but I think it's important because sometimes people may, for many different reasons, want to change a name, and none of them are ever light reasons if you actually do. But yours was more of a reason to reconnect to the roots of your own people, your own ancestors. Would you say that's an accurate statement?
Yes.
Okay. But it's not. I'm watching you go through it. It wasn't as hard, and in fact, Lori changed her name from her previous married name to my last name almost at the same time. And I think either one or the other did it first and then gave advice to the other one. And it's not as hard as people think, really. I mean, it took you about a month or so to
It was
complete the
easy, but I think you were telling me that um, people in more urban areas have a lot more hurdles and time to wait and all that. But if you're out in a rural area where it's a small towns, small
Mhm.
local government, there's not a lot going on. You don't have to wait in the DMV for 5 hours, and take a number and stand in line and all that crap. It was like
Yeah.
you just walk into the mostly empty building and take care of your business.
Yeah. One of the
Yeah.
benefits of rural living, and you get to shoot your guns off without getting the cops called on you. So,
Yep.
but we're not armoring, are we?
Say what?
So we're not armoring, are we?
Armoring.
The collection and the practice of a healthy Second Amendment, where would that fall in the scale of armoring? If it's for,
Well,
let's say,
it's
home
because
defense, hunting.
because it's for life affirmative purposes. It's for the protection of life, which
Gotcha.
is it's not armoring. It's actually, if you didn't recognize that as a natural function and a natural right to defend yourself, as you explained in that clip, every animal has its own defensive mechanism.
Mhm.
If you can't recognize that as a truth, that just demonstrates that you are armored,
I see. Okay.
because only an armored person would be incapable of recognizing such a self-evident truth.
I see. So you're more or less armoring yourself against reality, editing reality to fit a machination.
Their editing of reality happens before they even perceive it. So
Wow.
their function, it's their function of perception, their contact with their own core self is
Fascinating.
just
Yeah.
completely disrupted and disturbed. So by the time their brain even receives the information, it's already distorted. So it's not like they're sitting there selectively choosing it. It's yeah. But that's what people. That's why it's important to understand these sciences, is to actually understand why people are the way they are.
Sure. Well, that's
Yeah.
probably the least studied fields are psychology, of course, and those great scientific minds that have brought us some of the most incredible insights that pretty much everyone in academia borrows from. You know, Michael Tsarin talks about this a lot, but never gives credit to them. And he said recently that, you know, a lot of people are running back to Freud now that they're starting to realize all the insanity in the world is bigger than they had thought. And, you know, oh my God, we better go back to Freud because we don't know what to do and what we're doing isn't working. People, hello, fucking wake up here. There's fucking guys competing in women's sports. Do you think we ought to start paying attention? But well, it's, hey, really good to see you, brother. I can't wait to see you down the road at some point. Maybe we can get a conference going or something and bring some of these more enlightened minds together and do some presentations on these giants whose shoulders we stand on. What would you like to leave the audience for your sign off? Any contact information, any of that?
Van Helsing Library at yahoo.com. It's
Very
my
good.
email address. Yeah.
Excellent.
And what we saw in 2020 was the emotional plague at work, and this understanding of the psychology, but the bioenergetic psychology. Read Charles Konia and study this stuff. It'll actually probably serve a survival function as well at some point, where it'll amend your skill set, I guess you could call it, for understanding what what we saw in 2020. That was what Charles Konia would call the emotional plague. You had mobs of people running around on the streets, clubbing each other with fire extinguishers, shooting each other, destroying property, uh, turning on themselves. How many times did that happen where you got this person who's naively thinks that they're going to be a standard bearer of the leftist slogans, and then 5 minutes later they're getting fucking clubbed in the head by their supposedly own people that they were standing beside 5 minutes ago.
Yeah.
Well, that's because nobody's equipped with the actual character judgment. And character, there's an understanding of what character actually is, and it's a bioenergetic thing. So you can train yourself to recognize where a person is and if they're going to flip the whole thing, What do you say to that as far as character types and chaos and mobs?
Well, to bring it back to the beginning, I'd say you need some basic survival training only in recognizing character flawed versus functional. Functional character, here's my personal take, but functional character that's proficient at life will ask you for very little. In fact, they'd rather offer you something than ask you for something. Whereas a dysfunctional character is needy, probably constantly asking, emotionally ruddered. Their rudder is emotion as opposed to planning and execution. So you could almost say it's sort of the city mouse versus the country mouse kind of aspect. But having lived in the country for 20 plus years now, it's much harder to live in a wooded area than it is in a city. And we went up and visited the city yesterday, and I couldn't wait to get out of there, dude. It's just the concrete, the crowds, the massive EMF. I mean, I could feel the difference, and it just reeked to me. It's like, and I understand people have their own way of choosing what they want to live in and what they don't, but when you spend a lot of time, I mean decades, couple decades in the woods, and then you go into an urban environment, even just for a visit, it's very noticeable, the difference in the biorhythms, the changes of the feeling of your own body being within higher concentrations of EMF. And I'm more or less on the sensitive side as it is already. So it takes getting used to. I mean, I am a traveler myself. And I know what it means to go away for months but one of the reasons I brought you on was because you're the sort of traveler that is very rare, but you do it very well, and you're able to keep balance as you go through it, and it's a struggle here and there, but I have respect for you because there's few people I know that could do it and do it as well. And so maybe there's a need for a course on basic character survival and recognition. That could be something that you could add to the Tom Brown actual physical curriculum of getting out and actually doing the work in the woods with shelter, but add a psychological component to recognizing people and types that help you to better prepare to deal with the breakdown of the psyche in human civilization, which is really what we're seeing, and it's becoming expedited, unfortunately. But all things will hit the brick wall at some point, and or hit bottom. You could call it the bottom. But the good thing about hitting the bottom is there's only one way left to go, and that's up. So the sooner the better in my mind.
Yeah. Yeah. And the character thing, that would also be valuable for building your own teams, because now you're using more knowledge to actually assess the people that you're going to attempt to cooperate with. And you'll sort of be diagnosing them and judging them, not from like a moralistic standpoint necessarily, but you can also look and see what their character structure is. Do they have a strong ocular block? Are there you could actually tell if somebody, you would notice it right away if you were paying attention to it. If they had like a really strong ocular block, you would notice that's gonna manifest somewhere down the road.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, I guess it's really, quality over quantity, right? Somebody could have a lot of stuff but have a poor character, and it doesn't mean anything. All the stuff, they could give you all the stuff in the world, but it wouldn't mean anything if the character isn't there, so.
Exactly.
All right, buddy. Well, hey, it's good to see you again. Thanks for joining me. This is podcast number 2. I'll put some details below in the link. This will post strictly to Rumble. I might put a teaser trailer on YouTube. So I want to thank the audience. This is a growing podcast. It's something I've wanted to do for a long time. And Caleb's a good bud. I'm glad to see him again. Glad you're doing well and everything's rocking. Give my regards to Sparky if you see him. Right on. And let's do it again sometime.
All right, let's do it.
All right, buddy. Thanks, guys.
Welcome to the exploration of consciousness.